Mineral exploration company NovaRed Mining strengthening leadership team with a White House addition. Shield of the Americas Special Envoy Kristi Noem is here, and she is joining the company in an advisory role to expand its mission to advance critical mineral exploration using artificial intelligence. The Trump administration working to develop more domestic minerals to power the American economy and not rely on China. Joining me now in this Fox Business exclusive is the Shield of the Americas Special Envoy and NovaRed advisor, Kristi Noem. Kristi, great to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Maria.
Congratulations on this. Tell us more about what you're doing for NovaRed.
Well, NovaRed is a very important company in Canada that is doing exploration for critical minerals in a new way. They're using AI to go out there and put data sets together to make sure that we're locating the kind of rare earth minerals that we need in order to secure America's future as well. We currently do bring in about 17% of our critical minerals and copper from Canada. We want to continue to build on that relationship to make sure we're doing business with those that are closer to home and that are friendly countries in North America.
Yeah, I mean, look, the need for critical minerals is not lost on anybody. We understand the fact that China does the extraction and then the refinement of these minerals, which are so needed because we're using those in the military.
Yeah, the vast majority of the refining gets done in China. And so we're dependent on some of those critical minerals in the United States. A lot of it comes out of Chile as well. And so we're going to continue to build on relationships to make sure that we're addressing that and bringing that refining capabilities back here at home with the resources that we need to build on some of the initiatives that President Trump has been so aggressive on. You know, he has been aggressive on making sure our supply chains are secured. We're not vulnerable to other countries who aren't friendly to us like China, and that we are standing on our own 2 feet when it comes to our critical infrastructure.
So I wonder if this whole sector is going to be part of a new deal that the president does with Canada. Right now, Jameson Greer was on with us just the other day, and I know that they're working on a bilateral with Mexico and another bilateral with Canada. So the critical mineral story part of it?
Yeah, that is correct. Absolutely. Those discussions are ongoing, and they're important to our future. As you see AI getting developed, copper and these critical minerals are necessary for the build out on data centers, for the transmission, for cooling resources. All the electrical grids are dependent on these minerals to make sure that we can utilize the assets that we need. And a lot of our defense systems are highly reliant on copper and these kinds of minerals to come into the United States. So the agreements we have with Canada and with Mexico will make us more secure with our neighbors instead of depending on those across the world.
Very good. And I saw the president with the Prime Minister of Canada there at the G7 this week, where they both are. Now, Kristi, when you transitioned out of the DHS role and into this new role, the Shield of Americas, it was a new initiative that the Trump administration created to advance national security in the entire Western Hemisphere. Tell us about that role and what you're hoping to accomplish there.
Yeah, in my conversations during that time with the president and with Secretary Rubio, it was about taking the knowledge that I had used at the Department of Homeland Security for the last 14 months and using it to help our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. We have 13 countries right now that are signed up in an agreement on the Shield of Americas, and my advisory role is to work with them to build out border security, to deal with migration issues they may face so that we can stop mass migration before it impacts our southern border again, and to fight the cartels, to go out there and make their homes safer and to make sure that we're fighting those narco terrorists that have impacted them and their families. But then also, Maria, a big part of this is bringing American industry and businesses to these Shield countries. Instead of saying to them, don't do business with China, and then they have no other alternative, my job is to make sure we get American businesses down there to be those investors and those partners that these countries need to really help their economy and to help their families that live there.
And it was an important role. You did such a great job helping to secure the border. You were very visible out there as DHS Secretary, ensuring that people understood the dangers of a wide open border. Tell us how that's going in terms of now working in a different role to really do similar things in terms of securing America.
Well, it's been interesting because a lot of these countries saw what we did in the United States, and because we told our story so well, you know, we stopped a lot of the migration before it even got to our southern border during that time. Because we were enforcing the law and people knew that our border was closed, some of that migration stopped in these other countries from people that were infiltrating our country. Now they're dealing with some immigration issues. They want to have that same kind of stance and security for their people. And so having the ability to be a known entity to them and to work with them and tell them what President Trump has done and the changes that we enacted really is helpful for them to create more opportunities in their countries as well. So we've got great partners throughout SHIELD, and those that have suffered in the past from migration that has really hurt their families that live there, they're reliant on that partnership.
Well, I mean, it was important for the president to come up with another role for you to keep doing what you were doing in that regard, and we appreciate that. But Kristi, that was a tough couple of days there. That was a tough couple of weeks after that hearing in Congress where you were on the hot seat answering questions. What do you want to say about that? Do you want to say anything about the president's management in terms of dealing the way that he dealt with it? Take us back.
I appreciate the way that the president has handled not just DHS, but all the transitions within his administration. He's had more stability in cabinet members than many presidents have, or even his first term. Everybody is feels extremely valued to be a part of the team. For me, I think it's the first time the president has kept a cabinet member as a part of his administration, given them another role, and he's given me a role that I can build on. Not only can I continue to do some of the initiatives that I worked on at the Department of Homeland Security, I get the chance to share that knowledge with other countries. There's 39 countries approximately in the Western Hemisphere that I get the chance to work with and tell them what we do to secure our critical infrastructure, how we fight on cybersecurity initiatives to keep our critical infrastructure safe and to protect our businesses, what we're doing as far as modern policing tools and modern training for those that are out there on the front lines. We've had many countries come to me and say, tell us how you did that, tell us what companies we can do business with. We want to do what America has done the last year and a half.
When you were in that hearing in Washington, do you think that was the beginning of the plans to change your role?
Well, I know it seemed that way to the American public, but the president and I had been talking about it for about a week or two before that. We knew there might be a transition, and we had had conversations about it. And I'd also talked to Secretary Rubio about that previous to those events. So I appreciate both of them wanting to keep me a part of the team, recognizing the valuable asset and knowledge that I have that I can bring to the table. And my chance to be involved with this administration to do good work, I think, is really important to the Western Hemisphere.
How surprised were you when you first got to the DHS role, when you saw the number of people who actually entered the country illegally? I mean, what was your reaction when you first started understanding what had taken place in the previous few years?
I would say that my first reaction was we didn't really know how many people had come into the country. It was millions.
Says it's 20 million.
Yes, it could be. Absolutely. There's no indication that he's wrong on that at all. He could be exactly right. The other thing was how dysfunctional the department was. It was many times most of the employees were not in work or able to do their jobs. They were diverted off into different political vendettas in different areas. Cleaning up the department was difficult. There are a lot of good employees there, but many of them were not allowed to do their job. You know, FEMA was a mess, not responding to people based on their disasters. That's under the Department of Homeland Security. We train all of our federal law enforcement officers running the Secret Service. We also have CISA, which is in charge of cybersecurity operations and maintaining our critical infrastructure. So there was a lot to do, and very proud of how we got that department back on mission, enforcing the law and making sure that America was safe.
That was a tough mission.
Yeah, it was a big one. Yeah. And it's a good one. It's for me, every day I had the chance to get up and do something that mattered for the future of our country.
How's Mark Wayne Mullen doing?
I think he's doing a good job.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of help, and that's wonderful.
I mean, the department was largely people that you put in there. Did he inherit the team around him?
You inherit quite a few people that are in federal government for a long period of time, and then you bring in some politicals, and the White House is always involved in that too. I think Mark Wayne took a handful of his own people from his Senate staff, and then the rest of the politicals that are in the department came as recommendations from the White House. But we had fantastic people to work with when I was there, people that really understood what President Trump wanted to accomplish and got up every day ready to do it.
And of course, you were a great leader in your governor's role before going to the White House as well. What's your take on the upcoming midterm elections? Do you think the Republicans are going to lose the majority in the House? Do you think that voters understand the accomplishments of this administration?
I think they do. They're recognizing the results that President Trump is delivering, even with this Iran deal that is coming forward now for peace. That is going to resonate with the American people. We're going to see gas prices come down. We're going to start to see the economy kicking back up again. That'll be very helpful going into the midterms. Our challenge always, as elected officials, is to go out there and be normal human beings, go talk to moms and dads about how much you care about their kids having a future in this country. And if we lose this country, where will we go? This is the last great country on the earth, and that is why we protect and fight so hard for our freedoms and our liberties.
And China is fighting hard every day to supplant the United States as the #1 superpower. How much evidence did you uncover in terms of China being behind pushing people in to come into America illegally, so perhaps they could do surveillance work for the CCP?
Oh, absolutely. We saw very coordinated attacks of people coming into this country from China that were facilitated not just through the southern border, but through the northern border as well. Countries that I have worked with in Latin and South America have told us how they had Chinese operations set up for people to fly into their countries, almost like a travel agency would be. They would show up, be handed certain documents, a backpack, get on a bus, and then bust right up over our southern border. So it was a very coordinated facilitation of bringing in people that were Chinese nationalists into the United States. And overwhelmingly, the testimonies have been that they were the same age individuals, young, mainly men, some females, but very much a coordinated attempt to get individuals into our country to change our country.
And is China working with Mexico in terms of the drug trade, getting drugs into America?
They have facilitated that. I wouldn't say necessarily we found ties to it officially right to the government, but absolutely Chinese businesses, those tied to the CCP, those individuals working with the cartels to make sure that the product gets into the United States. And remember, China has a thousands-year plan to destroy the United States. They don't just build up their military. They don't just manipulate their currency, harm us with trade practices. They have a plan to kill our country from the inside by killing off our next generation of Americans. They will use every tool that they have, and that's what that fentanyl and drug trade brought to China that was a benefit to hurt America.
Wow. Well, you've seen all of this up front and close, and we appreciate that information. Kristi, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Maria.
Thanks so much. Kristi Noem joining us here on set. Stay with us. We'll be right back.